Hey, what's going on, everybody? Chip Brown here with horns247.com. Welcome to the Flagship podcast, joined, as always, by the managing editor of Horns 24/7, Taylor Estes. Taylor, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Chip. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing good. It is Wednesday, March 1st. We are
Yep.
in March Madness. And we are also 5 days away from the start of spring football for the Texas Longhorns, who will get things going on Monday, March 6th, when we expect to hear from Steve Sarkisian after we got we were supposed to have a chance to talk to him, and then the ice storm hit and we didn't get to talk to him.
Yeah. Apparently it impacted Zoom too, because we were supposed to do a Zoom with him for weather reasons. And yeah.
Yeah. And so that happened. But we've also got a huge basketball game tonight for Texas basketball. They're taking on TCU in Fort Worth. This is a must-win situation with Kansas beating Texas Tech last night. Kansas, their final regular season game will be at Texas on Saturday. If Texas can beat TCU tonight in Fort Worth, then that game will be for an opportunity for the Texas Longhorns to at least gain a share of the Big 12 regular season title with Kansas if they can beat the Jayhawks in Austin. But first things first, tonight, Texas at TCU. TCU coming off that win over Texas Tech in Lubbock last weekend. And Taylor, last night, Texas baseball. What a game.
Heartbreaker. I
I
know.
mean, zeros with a great pitching performance from both sides. LeBaron Johnson, fantastic for Texas. It's starting to come together for him. And afterward, David Pierce talking about the great relationship that LeBaron Johnson's forming with new pitching coach Woody Williams, and added a split finger fastball and a slider to his repertoire. And he was fantastic last night against LSU, but the bullpen gives up three runs in the ninth, some walks, and then a home run. And LSU basically, they didn't walk off because they were the away team, but basically put the dagger in the Longhorns late. But LSU, the number one team, Texas getting some good pitching. So some stuff to build on, even though you lose 3-0 to LSU.
Yeah, there definitely is. And I mean, great performance by LeBaron Johnson. I mean, I think it was a career high 9 strikeouts in the 5 innings, scoreless innings that he did pitch. But, it definitely broke down. But spring football, I think, Chip, we've been doing a position preview here on the Flagship podcast. And we're going to continue that today. There's so much going on with football coming up, so many things to watch. And it all starts on Monday. So a lot of sports stuff going, but as always, football season never ends here on the Flagship podcast.
That's right. That's right. And that's where all the excitement is, in anticipation of this upcoming 2023 football season, the last of the Longhorns football seasons in the Big 12. And all the expectations are on Texas to win it. So let's get into it. We'll be talking about the receivers and the corners today for Texas. And Taylor, when you talk about and we are live, so if you want to join in and throw in some questions on the live stream, that's fine too. But when you look at the receivers, when we go back a year ago, there was concern, and namely the lack of depth. And then, sure enough, Isaiah Nayer goes down with the torn ACL in fall camp, and depth absolutely was a concern for Texas football last year at the receiver position. And when you combine that with Quinn Ewers being a first year starting quarterback in college football, it was not a great year for the receiver position. And Xavier Worthy's numbers were down from his freshman season. Jordan Whittington, his numbers were down. And then, you had Casey Kane and Jatavian Sanders, the tight end, ended up being the second leading receiver by receptions on the team. So, but now flash forward to where we are going into spring football, and you look at the receiver room, and suddenly it's so crowded that Savion Red has moved to running back, and you've got Nair back from the injury, although we're still waiting to hear from Steve Sarkisian about what his availability will be for spring football and the spring game on April 15th. But you've got Adonai Mitchell coming in from Georgia, 6'4", 190 with some great experience. You've got Jonte Cook, the five-star freshman who's an early enrollee. DeAndre Moore is an early enrollee freshman, another, highly recruited four-star little, talented, little thicker than Jonte Cook. But, Brennan Thompson's a year older in this offense, along with Jordan Whittington and Xavier Worthy. So that receiver room is shaping up to be a big time strength. And I've said this before, but Steve Sarkisian, I'm hearing, is telling, people in his inner circle, this receiver room is the kind of room that resembles what he had at Alabama, or at least is closer to what he had at Alabama.
Yeah, and I see a question here from our YouTube channel, CTE11. This is a good question, Chip, that I think is important for us to address here. With Nair and Mitchell, do you think that will shift Worthy into the slot more often? That's going to be interesting because, when you look at Xavier Worthy, he physically looks more like a slot receiver, the speed that, but he, I do feel like last season with the way that, the passing game went, it wasn't all on Xavier Worthy. It wasn't all on Quinn Ewers. It was, kind of collectively a whole, but I feel like there was so much pressure on Xavier Worthy because he was the only deep ball threat. And I'm not sure if that's really necessarily where he's best, because there were a lot of contested catches in the deep ball passing game last year, and he's not great at that. And I'm not trying to knock on him. It wasn't one of his strengths. He struggled if there is a contested catch. But now you have two big body receivers who may, we've talked about this a little bit on Monday, may kind of fill a role similar to what Lil Jordan Humphrey and what Colin Johnson were for Sam Ehlinger in his second year in 2018. Then they had Devin Duvernay too, kind of the little bit more of the speedster guy. I kind of feel like that would make sense to me, but what's your take on it?
Yeah, I can see, I think Xavier Worthy's more comfortable at an outside receiver position. The thing you love about the slot is you need a guy who's going to be able to make catches over the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And Xavier Worthy has struggled a little bit. He's certainly struggled with it more than Jordan Whittington, who's been really good catching balls over the middle and is thicker.
Mm-hmm.
But Sarkisian's going to move him around. It would not shock me if Isaiah Nair and A.D. Mitchell rotated.
Mm-hmm.
In Tom Herman's offense, it was called the X receiver. It's the big receiver on the backside of the quarterback. Sometimes it's the last receiver in the progression, but you have a big receiver over there because they're easier to find late in the progression. And so it'll be interesting to see if, because Sarkisian really values speed. And so, Jonte Cook, that's a guy who could be competing in the slot. DeAndre Moore could be competing in the slot with Jordan Whittington. And so, what I'm most interested to see is the emergence of Quinn Ewers, the maturity of Quinn Ewers, and his ability to find those receivers over the middle and not focus so much on Xavier Worthy and really more just finding his second and third receivers in the progression. And, I felt like Jordan Whittington was underused last year because
He
he
was
was so
great in
good
the
on.
like blocking downfield, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
He
and
was great
he's
with the
good.
ball not in
He's
his hands too. Yeah.
right. He's a good blocker downfield, and I'll say this about Brendan Marion: his receivers blocked downfield. Casey Kane,
Mhm.
they helped a lot with the running game, and that's going to have to continue under Chris Jackson, who's got all these new faces in that receiver room. All those names I just mentioned: Jonte Cook, DeAndre Moore, A.D. Mitchell. Um, we haven't seen Isaiah Nair as a run blocker yet, or as a receiver who can block downfield to help the running game, but that's going to be required, especially with new faces at the running back position. So
Yeah.
we know Bijan Robinson, and Bijan Robinson led the nation in forced missed tackles according to Pro Football Focus last year. We know that guy can make stuff happen whether you're blocking for him or not. But
Yeah.
um, the new receiving, or excuse me, the new running back room this year, with Jonathan Brooks and C.J. Baxter, Savion Red, Jaden Blue. Those guys are going to need those receivers help downfield.
Yeah, they definitely are. And this comment here by SD, the pass game must be on point this season. Running back's kind of scary. I would say I could see definitely that. I mean, there's a lot of talent in the running back room, but nobody that's really been called upon to be the main contributor at running back. Jonathan Brooks had the opportunity technically to in the Alamo Bowl with both Roshan Johnson and Bijan Robinson sitting out, and they didn't really utilize the running game very much. So he has not really had the chance. We don't know how well the running back room, how well maybe one guy is going to be able to take all of the load, or if they're going to split it up, similar to what they did with Bijan and Roshan last year, with obviously Bijan being the leading back. But yeah, the emergence of Quinn Ewers is going to be huge. And a lot of times, we say it a lot, the biggest leap that you see oftentimes at the college level from quarterbacks happen between their first year to their second year. And so you want to see that progression. You want to see, I know I keep going back to this analogy, you want to see the progression in year two in Steve Sarkisian's offense for Quinn Ewers that you did see from Sam Ellinger, and from his true freshman season to his sophomore season in 2018. Aside from that Maryland game, he finished the year with only 5 interceptions and what was it, like 3,000 yards, over 3,000 yards passing. I mean, there was a substantial leap when it came to his understanding. I feel like the game slowed down a lot for him, and that's what I think you're looking for from Quinn Ewers, because there's way too many weapons now at receiver to have that be something that's hindering the progression of the offense, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Quinn Ewers has to take that natural next step as a second year starter in this offense, and that should help everybody, honestly. And that's something that's one of the biggest storylines we'll be watching when spring football kicks off next Monday. And I liked Quinn Ewers' accountability at the Alamo Bowl.
Yeah.
I liked that he said after the Oklahoma game, I kind of felt like I had things figured out. And then after the Oklahoma State game, I realized, oh man, I got a lot more to learn. And so he knows
Yeah.
that he's got to dig in and learn the details. He's got to study the defense as closely as they're studying him, so that he can know tips and tendencies too for his ability to connect with receivers in the passing game. And now you've got Arch Manning in that room pushing him, and that only helps. That
Yeah.
that kind of competition usually leads to better performance, because you're having to be sharp every day in practice to stay ahead of the guy behind you.
Yeah.
In this case, it's Malik Murphy and Arch Manning. So
Yeah. Iron sharpens iron, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I will say, yeah, I agree with you when you talk about with Quinn Ewers, his accountability. He was, remember, like from an age perspective, he was a true freshman because he was supposed to just graduate, he reclassified and all of that. And I feel like the fact that he was able to take accountability to recognized that he hadn't figured it out and wasn't afraid to talk about that. That's a type of maturity probably beyond his years a little bit. Especially with him being like 18 years old, probably. I think last at 19 at the oldest, but 18 years old probably. That type of accountability doesn't just happen overnight. So I think he has a very mature perspective in the way that he is going about it, and he's got to show it in spring because again, he has no reason to not have a good connection with the receivers now with him being one more year into the offense. And these receivers can really help him and take a lot of pressure off of him too, and take pressure off of the running game too, similar to how the running game last year took pressure off of the passing game at times because it could, carry the load with all new starters at running back. The receiver group can really be the one that can help, and Quinn Ewers too.
Yeah, I see this love it or leave it. I love it from Frank DeClouet. Love it or leave it. Texas has 2 1,000-yard receivers this year. I'm gonna leave that because that's typically when you have like a 4th or 5th year quarterback who knows exactly what the defense is doing on every play. I think Quinn Ewers is still evolving in that direction. But there's certainly the talent to have 2 1,000-yard receivers. I just don't know that it'll happen. That's a tall ask. And considering Xavier Worthy did not even get to 1,000 yards his freshman year when he had, 62 receptions, 12 touchdown catches, shows you that 1,000-yard receivers are special. And
Yeah.
and we'll see if the thing about Steve Sarkisian's offense is typically too, is the running back typically catches between 25 and 35 passes, which is higher than what we've seen, say under the Tom Herman regime. Sarkisian does a really good job of spreading the ball around. And I think that was one of the more disappointing aspects among the receivers. Now, he got Ja'Tavion Sanders the ball, and that proved to be great. First team All Big 12 tight end. And the guy has hands and makes contested catches. And that's guys like that, you'll throw him the football all day long. That's where Xavier Worthy's got to take the next step. He's got to be a better, contested catch maker and a better ball tracker. And so, I think that's where I'm probably the most excited about A.D. Mitchell, Isaiah Nair, Jonte Cook coming in, because those guys are hungry for the football and will go wherever they have to go to get it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I'm going to kind of flip this on you a little bit. Do you think Texas would have 2 receivers combined for 2,000 yards or more?
I think that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's possible. I think you could have, Xavier Worthy or someone with 1,200 yards and another receiver with 800.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's possible.
Yeah. I looked back. That's because I couldn't remember. I knew there was at least one 1,000-yard receiver in the 2018 season. That was little Jordan Humphrey. And then Colin Johnson was 985. So they did have, and that passing game and the receivers that was the strength of the team that year. I think it's possible. I do, with the second-year quarterback. But I agree. I think 2 1,000-yard receivers with a second-year quarterback probably is asking a little bit too much. But
and
it can be done.
especially with Ja'Tavion Sanders, it's rare you have a tight end who can stretch the field like Ja'Tavion Sanders. He takes, he's going to end up taking some of those receiver passes away because he's so talented.
Mm-hmm.
And he qualifies as if we want to call him a receiver, but he's a tight end. So that, and he's a guy who could come close, who could approach 1,000 yards in receiving after what we saw this past year. That guy is so hungry, and is such a sponge, has such a high football IQ. And I've already written how he's emerging as one of the new key vocal leaders on this offense, and they need him to, because he's not afraid. He's not afraid to speak up and hold others accountable. People made a semi
Alamo Bowl.
right,
Yeah.
semi big deal about him, kind of getting after Worthy for not catching those deep balls. And so, hey, you got to have that. And
Mhm.
when you lose Roshan Johnson, you're going to need that vocal leadership. And that's the other part we don't know right now about this receiver room. We know Jordan Whittington is sort of the, lead by example. When something needs to be said, he'll say it.
Mhm.
Um, but it's not natural for Jordan Whittington to be the vocal guy. Is A.D. Mitchell a guy? Is Isaiah Nayer a guy? I mean, Nayer has that crazy story of how, he was going to school in Minnesota. He was a basketball player. He moves to Arlington Martin he's taking a computer class, and the teacher is one of the assistant coaches on the football team and sees his size 15 shoe and is like, "Hey, do you play football?" And he's like, "Never have." He's like, "Well, we need you to come out and be a part of our winter conditioning program." And the next thing you know, the guy develops into a D1 prospect, goes to Wyoming, catches 12 touchdown catches in one season. So he's raw and untapped, but he's also as hungry as you can get. I mean, that guy wants to be special. He wants to play in the NFL. And that's what you got to have. You can't
Yeah.
you can't half step it. You can't have a guy who's just happy to be on the team, happy to go down to 6th Street in the UT gear and pick up co-eds. You need a guy who wants to, as Chris Beard used to say, has no backup plan.
Right. Yeah. And I do think maybe we haven't really ever had the chance to talk to Isaiah Nayer yet, even though he was, emerged as the probably lead receiver before his injury in fall camp last year. But he has already built relationships on this roster where a guy like A.D. Mitchell, I would imagine it would be difficult to come in as a transfer and try to be the vocal leader day one, because it's I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but I feel like if I was in that locker room and somebody did that, I would kind of be like, who are you? You know what I mean? Like, and so I wonder what Isaiah Nayer is from a leadership standpoint. We don't know, but I do think him having established relationships, being in this offense, even though he wasn't playing last season, but being in that locker room, it will be interesting to see kind of his demeanor, his personality, and if he could be a guy that can emerge as a vocal leader and take some of the pressure off of guys that may not enjoy doing that, but may have to at times, like a Jordan Whittington or something like that. But there's no doubt Jatavian Sanders for sure is going to be a vocal leader. I had no problem with what he did at the Alamo Bowl. I mean, I remember sitting next to Jeff Howe and I was just like scanning. So I was actually looking for Xavier Worthy just to see his sideline demeanor after he had those 2 back-to-back drops that what they both could have probably been touchdown passes, honestly. But I was looking for him, and then all of a sudden I like spotted Jatavian Sanders being like pulled away, and I was like, "Whoa!" I said to Jeff, I was like, "I don't know what happened, but Jatavian Sanders is pissed." I was like, so much so that they are literally pulling him away, and then Jeff Banks pulled him further and sat and talked to him for probably like 5 minutes on the sideline. I was like, "We missed something," but something happened there on the sideline, and then with what we did find out, I had no problem with it. Like, if you have 2 drop passes and you come over and you're just like, whatever, somebody needs to check you. And Jatavian Sanders was very capable and willing to do that. And I think that's not a bad thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you got to have those guys who are willing to put themselves out there. You can't lead unless you're producing.
Right.
And so the more guys who are producing and are willing to put themselves in that accountability role, the better, because there are some nice tendencies from what we're hearing about the work ethic of even some of the newcomers. I talked about Anthony Hill and CJ Baxter and the insider here recently. These guys are no nonsense, and that's what it's all about. I mean, they're just going to go do it, and we saw that from Kelvin Banks last year. I'm not trying to put that on CJ Baxter and Anthony Hill at this point, but it sounds like it's possible.
Yeah, for sure. And especially like Calvin Banks came in the summer. I remember being at Big 12 Media Days, and Bijan told the story about like they were doing some like workouts in the weight room, and he kind of joked with Calvin Banks, and Calvin Banks just like basically was like looked at him like, I'm here to work. And it's like at that time we didn't know what Kelvin Banks was going to be. At that time we didn't know what if he was going to be a starter or not, because fall camp hadn't even started yet. And he delivered for sure, And so yeah, I like the no nonsense approach too. It's possible. Clearly, it's a lot of pressure to put on freshmen because I don't think that's the norm, But Kelvin Banks definitely delivered too.
Yeah, yeah. And Bijan was funny about it because Bijan was
Yeah.
like trying to be a tough, upperclassman.
Yeah.
Was like, "Hey, we getting our work on today, Kelvin?"
Yeah.
Because the offensive line was finishing as the running backs were coming in, and Kelvin's like, "Have you been watching me?
Yeah.
I'm working my ass off in here."
Yeah.
So it
Because
that's what you
Bijan was
got to
like,
have.
"Whoa."
I mean,
Yeah.
Kelvin Banks, he's a guy we know is willing to be a vocal leader and be accountable, and that's awesome. He'll be able to do that as a sophomore, and the more you look around this team at each of these position groups, you find there's a guy, and that's what you have to have. You have to have a leader in every position group for the team to really take off, and that's big time. Obviously, Jake Majors is a guy who the team respects and is willing to be vocal and hold people accountable. But man, the more big guys, Casey Hampton always told me this, the more big, intimidating guys you have who are big time producers and leaders, the better your team's going to be because the whole team will fall in line because they fear those guys.
I
They
was
fear
just gonna
the
say, yeah.
the big guys. You got to have as Mike Rosenthal, our friend we used to do radio with, used to say, you need a couple guys on the defensive line with a screw loose,
Yeah.
who are maybe, a couple short of a six pack, because you need those guys to just be reckless and willing to do whatever it takes to make the play. And the more of those guys you have, the more of an intimidation factor you have.
Like a Roy Miller type.
Yeah, Roy Miller. I mean, my gosh, the list of defensive tackles at Texas is so impressive, and it got a nice shot in the arm last year from Keandre Coburn, Morrow, Ojimo. Ojimo was the highest rated defensive lineman on the team last year, according to Pro Football Focus, and so now you got to have it from guys like Byron Murphy, Vernon Broad, Tavondre Sweat, um, Alfred Collins.
Mhm.
We've been talking about how Alfred Collins needs to go from David Banner to the Hulk. Enough of this nice guy stuff. Now it's time to um, just get nasty. And that's what we saw from Keandre Coburn last year. Hopefully, for Alfred Collins, it's a similar step where he's just, pushing linemen backward, collapsing pockets, disrupting the running game. Because that was a huge key to Texas leading the nation in quarterback pressures last year, was the ability to just, impose your will on the guy crossing you backwards and disrupt everything. So, um, Taylor, as we kind of wrap up the receiver group, the speed factor is huge. And when you look at Xavier Worthy, Jonte Cook, Brennan Thompson, um, those are 3 10 flat 100 guys. And that's where Steve Sarkisian's eyes start to light up,
Yeah.
because he wants speed, speed, speed. Guys who scare the defense in terms of getting behind those safeties and making the big play. And now he's starting to stack up that speed at that position.
Yeah, like kind of what he had in 2020 at Alabama with, Jalen Waddle and Devonta Smith, and I mean the list actually goes on, probably from speed at the skill position on that team. But
Yeah, Jerry Jeudy, Henry
yeah.
Ruggs. I mean, those guys they're all just burners.
Yeah, for sure. I saw this before we get to the cornerback part, preview. I did see this question here from DJ Dog 31. Texas does have 14 true freshmen early enrollees that will be there with spring. I'll just list the names here. It's Arch Manning, Anthony Hill, Cedric Baxter, Jonte Cook, Malik Muhammad, DeAndre Moore, Colton Bassick, Darian Gillette, Jaden Chapman, Sadir Mitchell, Leona Leifau, Peyton Kirkland, Connor Stroh, and Andre Kojo. Those are the 14 true freshmen. And then Texas also has Wake Forest cornerback Gavin Holmes, who just transferred in. He is on campus. Jalen Catalon, transfer from Arkansas, is there. And then obviously AD Mitchell from Georgia too. So there's 17 mid-year enrollees, 14 true freshmen, and then the 3 transfers.
It's the most Texas has ever had.
Yeah. And it's impressive too that it's like some of their top-rated signees are actually early enrolled. I mean, all 4 5-star, prospects are on campus right now. Yeah. And then several top 247 prospects too. So
yeah, we talk about how Kelvin Banks, who ended up being a monster as a true freshman, was not an early enrollee. Just imagine if he was. He was able to digest everything and play with that kind of confidence as a June enrollee. So there's no question that it makes a big difference, because look at Cole Hudson last year. He was the only early enrollee of that banner offensive line recruiting group in that 2022 class. He ended up starting every game at right guard. He was not as highly touted as DJ Campbell, who now needs to take that step with Cole Hudson recovering from surgery. So it makes a difference, that early enrollee, and the fact that they have Jonte Cook at the receiver position. You mentioned AD Mitchell and DeAndre Moore, all in at January, learning this offense, getting comfortable, is big.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And David Williams here pointed out Ryan Niblett also ran a 10-4 last year as a junior, and expected to run 10-2 as a senior. So he's not on campus yet, but he will be with the summer enrollees. So more speed there at the receiver position.
That's right. All right. Well, let's move on to the cornerback position, because this group is loaded. And, you look at Ryan Watts at that boundary corner position, and he's not going anywhere. But that field corner position where Deshaun Jameson has now departed, that's where all the competition is going to be. And it's exciting. You got Terrence Brooks, who came on late last year. Austin Jordan got on the field last year and learned, and is a guy who's hungry and came from that Denton Ryan powerhouse program that won the state championship in 2020 in Class 5A, and Xavion Bryce. Now, those are the guys who, were here last year. They're in their second year, and all long-armed, fast. The competition, I hear, is intense. You mentioned Gavin Holmes coming in, and that's a veteran guy. And then you throw in Malik Muhammad as an early enrollee, another, top recruit at his position in the nation, long arm, fast. I'm really excited about this. Now, Jalen Gilbo is banged up, and that we got to hear from Steve Sarkisian on this, because, he basically missed most of last season with a knee injury. And, it sounds like there's been some complications there. So we need to find out what's going on with Jalen Gilbo, because that kid is a monster and is being groomed to take over for Jade Barron when he leaves at nickel. So this is this is a loaded room, and I have high expectations for the Texas cornerback position in 2023.
Yeah, and that was the thing I will say last season, early in, winter conditioning, we had heard that, Jalen Gilbo had come along so well that some former Texas players had come and watched some workouts and went to Deshaun Jameson and was like, "You better step it up or you're going to get passed over by this kid." Then he did have a team suspension, so that gave Deshaun Jameson more of a chance to take a step, and he played pretty well. I feel like Deshaun Jameson got a lot of kind of criticism from last year that to me, it almost seemed like a carryover from the year before, that people still, anytime that someone caught a pass on him, it was like, oh, here we go again. Because he did struggle, in the 2021 season. But that he's a guy that had a lot of experience, a lot of game reps. He's going to be difficult to replace from that experience standpoint. But I think from a talent standpoint, it seems to me like this cornerback room is probably more talented than I can recall seeing. Probably back to like when like Holton Hill and Chris Boyd and those, and who was the other? I can't think of what his name is. Devontae Davis. When
Yeah,
they were there, that was a talented cornerback room. I feel like this one is toe to toe, if not better, or
yeah,
has the potential to be, I should say.
yeah, and that's where this spring is going to be huge because those guys all stuck around. They didn't see doors closing. They stuck around because they want to compete and be a part of this culture and be a part of this team as it rises up. And so they're in it for the battle, and that's great news because you need depth. You've got to be too deep at every position, and Texas has lacked that. Certainly at the safety position, but even at corner. I mean, last year there was a good lesson learned for both Terrence Brooks and Austin Jordan in the Iowa State game. Ryan Watts goes down. They needed to shuffle. Both those guys got playing time. Both those guys had some struggles when they got back on the field for their next opportunity. They were ready,
Yeah,
and so you can get lulled to sleep if guys ahead of you are doing well, and you're thinking, well, I'm not ready to beat that guy out. Well, what if he gets hurt?
right.
You got to be ready, and
Yeah.
so I think there were some good lessons learned by those talented young guys. And I'm excited to see what Xavier and Bryce brings because, I had people telling me last year that Bryce was undeterred and is a guy who will stick his nose in and make tackles and is stride for stride with receivers down the field. So, um, you're not hearing about any hangdog guys who are like resigned to be second or third on the depth chart. You're hearing about guys who are constantly fighting to get to the top of the depth chart, and that's when your program takes the next step.
Yeah, and as you said, with both Terrence Brooks and Austin Jordan, when they had to go in for Ryan Watts in the Iowa State game when he left with, I think it was a stinger, right, that he had or
Yeah,
something.
right
Um,
right before the end of the first half.
yeah, I mean, they were just I mean, Matt Campbell and the Iowa State offense was smart because they saw they were a liability and they just kept picking on them over and over and over again. And the fact that the next time that both of them were in a position to contribute substantially coming off the bench, they both were more than ready. I was really impressed by that. I think that that's probably a hard lesson learned, especially if you're a true freshman. You're 18 years old and are just midway through your first football season. The fact that they learned it that quickly shows a level of maturity that is a good sign, honestly. And if they were able to turn it around that quickly, I'm very intrigued to see what they do this season, how much they take that next step, with a whole season, of kind of experience and knowing what the adversity in season, knowing you always got to be ready. Now I want to see what they're going to do from taking that next step at the corner position. They have the opportunity to secure it, and it starts this spring.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and think about those position groups lining up across from each other.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you talk about iron sharpens iron. Um, you're having to track down Xavier Worthy and all that speed. Brennan Thompson, Jonte Cook, uh, and that'll sharpen you up, and that's what it's going to take. And you look around the Big 12 at some of the more prolific receivers, and let's be honest, a couple of them were at TCU. Quentin Johnson and Darius Davis. They move on, and now everyone's looking at Texas and saying, okay, they got all the talent, they got all the skill talent. So, you know, let's see it, and then let's see if the corners and the DBs at Texas, day in day out, practice scrimmage, can hang with these guys. Because if they can, then there shouldn't be anything they see in a game that surprises them.
Yeah, yeah, with the amount of speed that Texas has here, and this. Sorry, I'm going to butcher this. Teta pair one saying Gavin Holmes is a burner. That's a guy we haven't seen yet too, but has some experience coming from Wake Forest. So I really like the way that this secondary is kind of shaping up right now, Chip. Not just at corner. I do like the potential at corner. Obviously, Ryan Watts came in, was a huge impact guy and really helped, that position. Honestly, they needed him to be the guy, and he answered the call, and he's back this season. I like the potential of the cornerback room. I really like the potential of the secondary. Now, the problem is we haven't seen a lot of it, right? And we haven't seen Jalen Cadwalon if he can stay healthy, that type of stuff. But if all these things kind of align, this could be a really good secondary that Texas fields this year.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we talked about this a little bit, was a little bit problematic, was the adjustment to the quarters match, pass defense that was installed last year. Another year in the system. We talked about the importance of Jalen Catalon as a guy who can help to quarterback that secondary and make sure that guys are getting passed off the way they're supposed to be passed off when receivers pass from the outside into one of the interior quarters of the field. And that's where Texas got into trouble a little bit last year. Gave up some big plays, as the safeties and either the nickel corner or the field and boundary corner, the pass off wasn't clean. And at one point, Quentin Johnson, the best receiver on the field, was wide open for a laughing, walk-in touchdown in one of the biggest games of the year. And that just cannot happen. So, that's the kind of stuff that needs to get tightened up. That, everyone's got the physical ability. Okay, are you communicating? Are you sure of your assignment? Are you assignment sound as a defense, especially in the secondary where you're the last line of defense? And I think that's where I'm looking for this defense to take the next step, because the safeties and corners have to be totally in sync to be a championship defense.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And I do think the fact that Texas has retained all of the coaches on the defensive side of the ball is huge. And I know that probably sounds silly, but it's been almost a revolving door of change at Texas, especially on defense when it comes to coaching. Whether it's coordinators, position coaches, you name it, scheme changes, all of this stuff. That I like that they're in the same scheme, same staff, entirely same staff on defense there, because the more familiarity the coaches have with each other, with the personnel the players have with each other, and in the system, you can expect progress, even if there are some open positions that they need to fill. I think that's something Texas lacked for so long was the consistency. And so even though there was talent on the rosters, it's like, okay, well, this guy's had 3 defensive coordinators in 3 years, 3 different schemes. They weren't the same, and even if the schemes were the same, a lot of just the getting to know the coaches and what the calls are. There's just so much that I think the constant revolving door of change on defense is why the defense had all the hype but never really lived up to it. That's where I feel like Steve Sarkisian's done a good job of keeping the defensive staff together, kind of silencing the noise, especially after year one when everyone was wanting Pete Kwiatkowski fired, all of that. I think he's done a really good job of maintaining that consistency. And now let's see it, continue to progress and show up on the field because they've been recruiting too well to not and keeping the staff together to not have that next step on defense.
Yeah. All right, Taylor, you ready for some love it or leave it?
I am. If you're watching on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will clearly just go right in. But if you're listening on the podcast, we're going to take a quick break, but stay tuned. We will be right back with some more football talk in Love It or Leave It. But let's go into this for our YouTube audience here. Chip, you ready for the first one?
I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm getting old. My eyes, I'm like, wait, where is it? All right. First, love it or leave it. You're glad Texas will have no alternate uniforms for football because burnt orange is the color of sunsets and sunrises. Love it or leave it. Chris Del Conte's statement there.
Yeah, I thought this was hilarious. It went viral from his town hall meeting when he was talking about how some teams, he even mentioned his time at TCU. They were doing anything they could to get attention in recruiting and all that. I'm going to love this because Texas is iconic and their color is unique. Mm-hmm. I mean, who else is burnt orange?
Right.
What is it? Pantone 11. I agree. They're iconic. They're classic. They don't need to trick it up. So yeah, I'm going to love this. And I know people were getting on Del Conte that sunsets are certainly different colors other than burnt orange, but
some are pink.
He's got a point. I mean, there usually is some burnt orange in the sunrise and the sunset. Taylor, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much of a strong opinion. I would say that. I do like the, consistency and that the, classic traditional type of college football jerseys. I mean, Alabama has it, Notre Dame, USC, Texas. I understood what he was saying though, with a TCU where it's, a smaller school that when he was there at times was not a Power 5 school and they needed to get attention. They needed to try to draw recruits in because they're competing for recruits in the state of Texas against schools like Texas A&M, and then, other schools coming in, Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, all of that type of stuff. They needed to kind of do that. I don't think Texas needs to. I wouldn't be opposed though if there was maybe a different, pants or something. I think keep the jerseys the same, but you can switch something up maybe. I don't know. I don't really have too strong of an opinion. So I wouldn't say I'm glad. I would just say that it's kind of expected at this point. So I don't know if that means I love it or leave it though. I guess I'll love it just because I just don't really care if I'm honest.
All right. Love it or leave it. Number 2.
All right. Second one is love it or leave it. Anything other than Texas facing Texas A&M, Oklahoma, and Arkansas as permanent football opponents in the SEC would be a disappointment.
I don't know. Facing A&M, Oklahoma, and LSU would be pretty cool. Honestly, I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna.
You just want to go to games there, don't
I just
lie.
want to go to Baton Rouge.
Exactly.
So
we didn't get to go in 2020.
I'm gonna leave this. I mean, I do think it will be Texas facing A&M, Oklahoma, and Arkansas as permanent football opponents in the SEC. But I would take LSU over Arkansas in that equation. Taylor, how about you?
Um, yeah, I'm going to leave it. I think Arkansas or LSU would be fine. I think they definitely need to play A&M. Obviously, have to play Oklahoma. That's a no question about it. That needs to be done. I feel like even like people want to Aggies want to say this, Longhorns want to say this, like they don't care about each other. I literally saw earlier in the stream that there was an Aggie commenting and saying like, "Go Ags! Y'all care about each other. You need to play each other every year. Every year. It's good for football. It's good for the state of Texas, and it's just I just loved that rivalry when it was there. So that's a no question. Oklahoma, no question. I think Arkansas or LSU could be kind of interchanged. So I will leave it too.
I like it. All right, love it or leave it, number 3.
All right, last one. Love it or leave it. Kansas will have wrapped up the Big 12 regular season championship by the time the Jayhawks come to Austin to face Texas on March 4th.
Okay, that would mean that Texas loses tonight against TCU, and I'm leaving this. Here's my rationale. Texas' best game of the year to me this year was the win at Kansas State because Kansas State was playing well. Texas was behind in that game, came back, won it on the road. It was a huge win against a purple team. And now Texas has to go on the road, beat a purple team that's playing well. Mike Miles is back for TCU from injury. He missed a few games. He's averaging 16 a game. Eddie Lampkin, their big guy who did play against Texas in their first meeting, is apparently a game time decision tonight. If Texas wants to do what it wants to do in the NCAA tournament, I feel like they need to win this game. And then I think they beat Kansas and they do get a share, but it's all predicated on tonight. Texas has not lost 2 games in a row all year. I'm going to ride with that trend, and I'm going to leave this. Kansas will not have wrapped up the Big 12 regular season championship by the time they show up in Austin on Saturday. Maybe it's wishful thinking, but I'm going to leave it. Taylor, how about you?
I want to leave it, but I will say Texas in road games for the last month has not been great. I mean, they've lost the last 3 straight road games, I believe. The last one they won was Kansas State, as you had mentioned, but then they lost at Kansas, they lost at Texas Tech, they lost at Baylor, all in the month of February. They're so much better at home. But I think that this team's mature enough to know what is on the line. So I'm going to leave it, and I'll say that they're going to end that road losing streak, and they need to, honestly, because, I mean, are they hosting the NCAA tournament? No. So they're going to be on the road sometime coming up here. So, yeah, I'm going to leave it too.
Yeah, plus it would just be a truly amazing story if they were able to win a share of the Big 12 regular season championship after having their coach dismissed, suspended, and then dismissed 8 games into the season. And so what a game tonight. All right, folks, we'll be back to wrap up that game and get spring football going. Again, spring football for Texas starting on Monday. We appreciate each and every one of you for stopping in and listening to the Flagship podcast, checking us out on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. For Taylor Estes, I am Chip Brown. Until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Stay safe and keep the faith.